You are listening now to the Spirituality Now podcast, the show that is solely focused on practical spirituality, leadership, and mindset skills with the aim and purpose of supporting you master your life. Welcome to the Spirituality Now podcast. Welcome to the Spirituality Now podcast. I'm super excited because our guest today feels like ceremony. And every time that I'm with him, something happens. You're probably going to hear laughter and everything. I'm going to introduce him. I'm going to do the bio in front of him. I kind of like to do the bios in front of the people because it's like a third person witnessing themselves. But I want to start this podcast by saying that our guest today was one of the first people that gave us an opportunity when our podcast was new, when our podcast was in English and Spanish. It was him, that I'll name him in a moment, and Richard Rod. It was Richard Rod, the founder of the Gene Keys, Francisco Jara, who is here today with us, and then Dan Brule, which is a bread worker, bread master international. So these three men blessed our podcast to begin with, and then it followed with Sean Wallen, who is a very alpha leader type, but we got foundations, being like really feminine kind of spirituality now. We got our support and our blessing by the masculine. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And those of you who are watching on YouTube, please watch, because here are my guests, my brother. He's so handsome. I mean, he's known for that. Besides a handsome soul, mind, body of work, and legacy, and the work that he does for the world. He's really an incredible human. So Francisco's career began in the mortgage and finance industry, where he quickly became a respected leader. You really are a respected leader. It's phenomenal. Armed with a bachelor's in science and economics, he founded his first company in his late 20s. Oh my gosh, it's like the journey of an entrepreneur really starts young. However, after facing stage 3 cancer, financial crisis, and a divorce, he pursued a transformative path, earning a master's in spiritual psychology from the University of Santa Monica in 2009. You do the math. Reinvigorated, Francisco founded Mortgage Phoenix Group, which is truly, I believe, is a portal for soul evolution, a lending company that balances profit with purpose by funding homes for women and children in Ensenada, Mexico. His journey of service deepened with the creation of Giving Business Soul, an organization dedicated to integrating spiritual and personal development into the professional world. He's a philanthropist at heart, honestly, one of the best. And Francisco is committed to leveraging business for societal good. A mentor and coach, he continues to inspire leaders to align their careers with their soul's purpose through his ventures, and he wrote a book, and he has an awesome podcast. And welcome, my dear brother, to the show.
Wow. That is very nice to witness, sort of in third person there, that introduction. So thank you for that, my beloved sister. And thank you for the acknowledgement of that Spiritually Now podcast that you started back then. I do remember Richard, myself, and Dan kind of coming in to start that. So I certainly appreciate the acknowledgement to the masculine. And yeah, just for the beautiful introduction. It's a pleasure to be here and to reconnect with you and to share in this moment.
And we have stories to tell.
We do.
But we're going to start, because this is not about me and my story. It's about Giving Business Soul. It's about what Francisco Jara is doing in the world, because I really think, a podcast cannot encompass the power of the impact that you and the amazing people that you have summoned, and that you have all magnetized these incredible souls. I keep seeing all the people that you bring to your events and podcasts, and I'm like, wow, I can just say wow. So let's start, I guess let's start from the beginning, because I think let's start with the dark nights of the soul. And I say plural because you have gone through them all. And tell people a little bit about who Francisco is, how how was the journey of the dark night, which is repetitive, right? Anytime someone tells me I had my dark night of the soul, I'm like, one of many.
You're just getting started. You're just getting
Just the
started.
beginning, everyone. But why don't we start there? Because I think that in the Bible and in many spiritual traditions, it is said that the day starts in the night. So let's
Hmm.
start there, my brother.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Thank you for that. Yeah. So I certainly I do, and in a lot of ways, I do feel like the beginning of my life did really start with sort of the dark night of the soul. I think until then, I would say that I was mostly on autopilot. Very much seduced by the external world of the matrix, and being an entrepreneur very early on. By the time I graduated at 22, I just start doing everything that I learned in the business section of the bookstores and trying to get to the top of the mountain. And since I'm a Capricorn, I guess I'm designed pretty well for that climb. And a lot of discipline, success came, and then life woke me up, and that wake up really, in my estimation, began in 2006 with the stage 3 cancer. Even at that time, I would have been considered to be a very healthy human by most societal standards. Gym person. Very much taking care of the temple and the body. Um, and I think it was the divine's way of first getting my attention. I prior to that, I was just moving at a million miles to an hour, and it was like the first slowdown. And certainly, went through that and had a very powerful experience. I think learning to live closely to death has been one of the great awakeners for me. I believe as humans, when we contemplate death and get comfortable with death, it's really the beginning of learning how to live a full and total life, learning to really sort of suck the marrow from this existence, by living fully and totally. And then I experienced a multi-million dollar business bankruptcy. I'm on top of the grenade that's sort of practically sinks the entire economic world and mortgage industry back in the Great Recession. That makes me pretty much close down the doors of my first company, and very hard to do that, but simultaneously what was needed. And then the one that really broke my back was, I think, the divorce. I'm a hopeless romantic, I guess, in a lot of ways, and so having my spouse and my partner was everything to me at that point. And so moving through that, it just really forced me to really reassess everything. And what I came to find out, again, I go into the University of Santa Monica really 2010, and I was someone that was big into personal development. I'm a personal development junkie. Went to all the seminars, read all the books, hundreds and hundreds. I'm a voracious reader. And I didn't really, at that point in 2010, didn't even know there was an entirely other branch of development known as soul development. And I was like, wait a minute, how is it that I've read hundreds of books and gone to all the seminars, and yet I have no understanding of the inner terrain of the soul? And when I started to understand the language, first off, of consciousness, the inner realms, how it all works, the frameworks, to really be able to see the unconscious, the way the shadow moves, the way these tendencies move, I became enamored with that world, really. And I then applied my voracious reading tactics to learning everything I could in that field. Started studying, the great Carl Jung. Dove deep into feminine mysteries around that time as well in 2012, and learning about womb shamanism and learning about the gene keys and exploring Richard Rudd's body of work. And as I began to synthesize all of that, what started to become very visible was that I was missing maps. I was missing frameworks. I did not see what I could not see. And once I started to understand that there is an actual target in consciousness, there's a target in soul development, and understanding that all the ancient traditions held this understanding, held these maps, I went on an adventure. And I said, okay, then I want to unite my opposites. I want to bring into union these forces that have been in conflict within me, and I want to heal these emotions that have sabotaging me from all these years. And so I began the adventure into that domain and looking at, again, Carl Jung's work inside of individuation and how he mapped out the process of how to arrive to that marriage, that internal marriage, learning a bit of some of these mystery schools that held that. I began and I worked very diligently in that process. And as I was working in that process, like, and this is one of the big messages that I do have for individuals, is that when we start from inside of ourselves and we begin the pathway of coming into the soul, and we anchor what it is that we're bringing forth in the world in with the soul, that we anchor what's coming out into the world inside of the soul, inside the divine, then it's got roots. It's got the ability to sustain. And more than that, it feels fulfilling to be working from that. And I believe all entrepreneurs have something to give this world. And if we don't bring that out, kind of like what the Gospel of Thomas said, it will destroy you, but if we bring out what's inside of us, it will save you. And I think that that's kind of where we are in society right now. We have all incarnated at a transitional time in human history where we're waking up to the idea that we got to pull out that's what's inside us and bring it out to the world. And it's urgent now. I mean, we can see it. It's very clear. We're in the unveiling and the truths are coming out. And I think that the further you go into yourself, the further you get to see the entirety of the human story. I think there's a direct relationship between how deep you go to the secrets that become unveiled in this 3D reality. So I think I'm going on a tangent here, Yvonne.
No, actually, no. It's actually, I think it's perfect. Israeli, I've known you for a couple of years and probably lifetimes, and
Yeah.
you're a very eloquent speaker. It's very clear. Everything you share, I don't think it was a tangent. I think it was a deepening. And I think it was a deepening. And in that, thank you for sharing that. And in that deepening, I'm going to highlight something and then come back to several things that you said. This is the first time I ever heard this, and it really caught my attention. The target of the soul. Oh, could you expand into that? Like, can you expand that? Like, when you understood that there is a target, and I think you already said it, but I think I want to highlight it because I think that for my entrepreneurial friends, for the people that are really focused on systematic awareness and all of that, this is phenomenal. This will give you like a pointer of to where are we going? How are we choosing? How are we living? And so talk to me about the target of the soul.
Yeah. I think this is a really powerful thing. When I first really began to sort of see it fully for what it was, is that there's a meta goal in consciousness. There's a meta goal, right? There is something that we're all aspiring towards, but we really haven't known what that was. We really just thought, okay, I just want to be a great person. I want to be a loving person. I want to embody love. But it's kind of like, if you're going to be working in the inner terrain of the soul and in your unconscious, you need language, first of all. It's like if you're going to go into an industry of insurance or real estate or mortgage, you cannot operate an industry without language for that industry. The same goes for the soul. The same goes for like soul development. Like the first starting point is that you need language for all of this. And the beautiful thing is that we're not the first individuals to actually go into these places. There have been great sages and saints and prophets that have mapped it out for us. But we just didn't really understand, those maps, and it's been a resurgence, really. That's really, I think we're in a wave of resurgence of all of this wisdom that's looking to reconnect us to the soul. And in order to really have soul presence, to have soul power, we essentially have to reconcile the opposites within us. The opposites could be language as the light and the dark, the masculine and the feminine, the unconscious and the conscious, the active and the reactive. Spirit and God is found in between those poles. Like we can draw in the greater when those poles, those opposites, that the tension is just right. It's in harmony. When that harmony is there, it allows us to draw in more from the mythos, from the quantum, from the domain of spirit. And all that to say that the soul really, as we go deeper into ourselves and reclaim these lost parts, process the emotions that we didn't have tools to process when we were younger. When we do enough of that work inside of ourselves, it's almost like the soul is buried deep underneath all the emotional rubble. And the more we reconcile and go deeper, 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 until we come into maybe that sacred wound of ours, and we finally reconcile that with our own presence and our own love and our own light. It's like all of a sudden, it's like the light and the dark, the masculine and the feminine make love in you, and then the soul is it's a divine third that makes its way, and that's what's in us. That's I think the aspect of what we're here to deliver, that the world. It's the song from our soul. It's the frequency. It's the
Wow,
frequency.
Francisco, it's again, it's such a summoning your words, and when you speak about, I'm going to again highlight a couple of things and come back to so much here. When you speak about language that is needed, and you gave such a good example of, if you are in the mortgage business, you need language. Like if you are in an accounting business, legal business, right? I I've been studying Zen, and it's been quite liberating and very clarifying. And in Zen, they call this the samadhi of words.
Hmm.
You really require not to use words as a tool for personal illumination, clarification, and enlightenment. And wherever you use them, internally, externally, and bring that language, bring that logos, right? Bring that creation of of God through the spoken word, which is Genesis, right? In the beginning was the word,
Mm-hmm.
God. This is this call for a responsibility for all of us listening to Francisco right now, to really assess what is the language revealing to us right now. It's such a powerful tool to access consciousness in such subtle levels. But this is the first time I hear it in a way that actually it can help us access soul. And you took us through a system. I mean, I'm going to listen to the podcast again and again, because you took us literally through a system, and you literally explained the dance of duality, right? Which truly, in essence, at a meta level, we are living in a non dual world. But that duality for me, while you were speaking, I was having this vision of the mud of the lotus flower coming in together like muddy, and just all of the things, and sweaty and everything, for the soul of the lotus to bloom. So wow, you're just wow. It's quite a journey here what you are sharing. So well, when these deep diving, when we take that apparent risk, when we decide to really get a plunge into the waters of who we truly are and who we came to be. What's next? How do you emerge? Because you emerged as Giving Business Soul. You emerged as who names a mortgage company Phoenix? It's incredible. It's such a representative of this, like from the ashes into the light, right? From this rebirthing quality of your words, Francisco, of your business, of the philanthropies that you live. So, just to give it a guiding light for people here, let's start. How do you emerge, and how does this, well, I believe it's a duty of the soul, right? As you are emerging, what demons do people battle? And as you battle them and you kind of win, like Kobe Bryant, you begin to rise. What are the duties of someone that wakes up towards society?
Hmm. Yeah, well, I feel that when you the illusion of the external world finally comes to an end for you, and you begin the most courageous work that is humanly possible of going inward, and putting as the target this meta goal in consciousness, was just to unite your opposite. If I was whispering in the ear of every soul incarnating, I would say, unite your opposite. bring your spirit to the matter. Bring the light of your mother in. And when you begin this process again of uniting the opposites, there's a universal law that's called the law of correspondence that says that as above, so below as above. What I feel that we do when we venture into the depths of ourselves and we bring out Excalibur out of the stone, we bring the soul out of the matter, right? It's like, then it's our responsibility to do the what the soul wants to do. And I believe that then what happens for the entrepreneur, and this is why Giving Business Soul exists, is to give the entrepreneurs the frameworks necessary to establish organizations that embody soul, right? And so when you look into it externally, then you look at it and say, okay, well, if I just united my poles inside of me, then externally I have to unite the organizational poles. And the organizational poles, what I mean by that is we have two basic types of organizations on the planet. We have businesses and we have nonprofits. Business is masculine, nonprofit is feminine, right? You feel the energy of business, linear, logical, it's the logos, it's the mind, right? Then you think about nonprofits or philanthropy, this is more feminine, and you can feel the texture of that. This is more heart, it's more soul. And both of these energies, just like us, have been wounded and they have been existing independent of each other. And so the call is to bring them into union, within one organizational structure, and putting at the very center and at the very heart of the organization the life-affirming principle of the universe, which has always been the feminine. Right, the feminine has to be first. As Walter Russell states beautifully in The Universal One, we do not live in an electromagnetic universe. That's how we've been, sort of tricked. It's not electric, which means masculine. Magnetic is feminine. It's not electric magnetic. It's magnetic electric. So it's feminine masculine. And from that logical sequence, and the feminine's first, and in an organization and in our world, if we're going to come into harmony, we have to abide by the universal laws that inform the cosmos. And so when you put the feminine first, like in my case, it was about building homes for women and children, and then using my business acumen, my understanding of the mortgage industry to move it forward. And through that process, I've developed the Mortgage Phoenix Group. And through living an entrepreneurial life in that way, I felt like it arrived me to what all entrepreneurs are looking for, which is purpose and fulfillment. And why did it arrive me into fulfillment? Is because if you still think that an external physical thing is going to fill the void that you feel, you're just mistaken. Like, if you haven't figured that out, then what happens is you're a hungry ghost. You're a hungry ghost, just sort of in the world thinking more houses, more cars, more money. That's going to fill the void, but it's an illusion. It's an illusion of the external world. The only thing that will fill the void is service. It's love. It's generosity, And so when you begin to live, with a philanthropic heart, with this love for humanity and the way that you operate your business, that way of being in service, that way of operating starts to fill the void in the heart. And when that fulfillment finally arrives, like, all that you can sort of muster to God and the divine is thank you. This is the key. And so to answer your question, Ivonne, I think that, once you take the courageous path to, bring Excalibur out of the matter, out of the stone, to bring the soul out of your body, then it's a matter of obediency. And what I mean by obediency is, like, the soul whispers, wisdom whispers. And it's going to, a lot of times, I think, show up almost like anti, like it just doesn't follow logic, and it's going to ask you to do things that don't follow logic. And you're going to have to develop a trust to that voice, and a faith, and more than anything, a surrender, to understand that now there's an organizing principle in the soul. And when it gets activated, it's like it starts to bring everything that you need. It's almost like a phi ratio, it starts to really, like, the same organizing principle that we see in nature is activated inside of us. And that spiral, that Fibonacci, that phi ratio starts to bring everything that is required for you to fulfill mission. And that's what it comes down to at the end. That obedience is about, like, always be on mission, to be on mission. I think Rilke said it was like, all is mission, all is mission.
I love what you're sharing. And wow, I'm going to again go back into this spiral, going in and out of it. But I want to emphasize something that you said about the hungry ghost. This is so important because when you understand that hungry ghost phenomena, Buddhism explains it so well in its cosmology. We have the demon realm, the hungry ghost realm, we have the animal realm, and we have the human realm.
How they call it, the hungry ghost realm?
I thought you were referring to that.
No, I had no idea.
Francisco, you will love this because
Okay.
the cosmology, the Buddhist cosmology, I'm such a student of it because it's so well based in science and it's so well based on a science of the soul. And they have been the ones of thousands of years telling us there is a hungry ghost realm. And now when people study Buddhism, they think like, oh my God, the hungry ghost are in like another realm. The hell realm is in another realm. No, it's everything happening within us. But when you say that, I think this is one of the challenges and opportunities that we have in the current reality of our existence. Because since people are trying to fill that void that will never be filled up by the externals, sex, pornography, all the things we're seeing in politics and more houses and more planes and social media is such a market for food for the hungry ghost. It's unbelievable. It's the hitting of the dopamine, right? Easy with a like, with a post, etc. But when I thought you knew. I'm like, wow, he's talking. This is Buddhist cosmology. So the hunger ghost realm. It doesn't matter what you give them; they will never be fulfilled. So we gotta tend to that part of us to always aspire to be human. Because in all the cosmology, it is such a privilege to be incarnated as a human being. And in that humanity, use our humanity as a tool, obviously, to develop the soul and make sure that your own hungry ghost, the world as hell, the politics, the power misuse. And we'll talk about power because I think of all the people that I know, you speak about the use of power so powerfully, just to speak, or empires, how they fall, all of that. But the hungry ghost realm is what we're seeing now. And that's what's kind of eating alive our children and the generation of confusion and promising with TikTok, with all of these things, quick gratification response. It is just like sugar. It's becoming an invisible addiction. And the hungry ghost realm is opening the field right now. And so I thought you were mentioning that. So I thought, because
Good to know, though.
It's very strange to know someone that can understand the cosmology of the soul. And it's phenomenal to study it in the Buddhist perspective. Anyways, so just with that, I just wanted to highlight that from you. And I love how fulfillment, which I am in favor of, and I always believe that supporting others to be fulfilled, it really is. It's what really feeds the soul. It's what helps us incarnate again and again. It's what helps us just be not only a good human, but someone that contributes to the evolutionary aspect, to the pulse, right? To this pulse of living, of breathing, of all of us growing together and creating impact. Not only for the sense of creating impact, but because it's kind of a divine obedience, right? There's you obey this energy, you obey this inner voice, which is the voice of faith, which is the voice, call it God, call it the Holy Spirit, call it the great evolutionary impulse of the universe. Once you obey it, it's like the animal kingdom. The mountains obey, they know when the storm comes, when to shape themselves. The ocean obeys the storm, the tide. It's such an incredible harmonic pattern that builds. You were talking about Fibonacci sequences, etc. But the more you were talking, I could see there's a sacred geometry forming. There's a torus forming. There is this incredible geometry, and geometry is the language of the universe, right? frequency and sound. So you were kind of speaking with your words, sacred geometry, brother. Amazing. So now that we talked about this, well, that I feel that we're opening doors through this podcast, and there's so many ways that you serve as a philanthropist, the world, and in business. Talk to us a little bit about all of that. I think you already what you shared is such an incredible master class and an incredible deepening and summoning of our souls. So tell us a little bit what you are doing. Let's talk about giving business soul, the Phoenix Mortgage, and also what you do for the houses in Ensenada, because I love that.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. So, yeah, after sort of developing this blueprint for organizations and having, leading with philanthropy, we ended up choosing Ensenada, Mexico to build these beautiful little homes for farmers in that area. And we did our first build in Nicaragua in 2013. At that time, actually, Annabelle went with me. I took my sons, and that was the beginning of that entire process. And then went to Colombia, Guatemala, Peru a couple times, and then we ended up finding Ensenada, Mexico in 2017. And the Mortgage Phoenix has been doing, I call it the Philos, the philanthropy donation towards, Ensenada now. And I mean, it's probably a decent amount of money, maybe $500,000 that we've donated towards that. And it's been a beautiful thing to actually be in service. And I think every leader needs to participate in the philanthropy of the organization. We have to lead from the front. We have to re-engage that hieros, that sacred leadership, and demonstrate the reference point of what an embodiment of somebody who, brings those poles together, who starts to lead with philanthropy. At the same time, too, I don't want to give anybody the misinterpretation that, that somehow this modality is soft, or that it's all just soul and philanthropy. No, like it's got to be.
Philanthropy is like it's hardcore, you know.
Yeah.
So everything's like, I mean, when but real philanthropy is at place and you really care for the people, it's like you need your sleep.
Yeah. Well, you need your sleep too. And in order to be able to be philanthropic, you also have to be a really good business person. You have to be able to
Let's
generate
talk about
revenue.
that because you are phenomenal in business. You are phenomenal. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one of the greatest advantages that you can have as an entrepreneur is learning the language of the subtle, learning the language of the soul. When we reorient to the original template that we were designed to do, which was to work from the inside out, to work from the soul out, this is where you begin the involutionary process. So you have involution and evolution. Involution is when we start to venture into ourselves. And when we start to venture into ourselves, we're going to run into emotions, unprocessed material. But what is starting to develop is that your consciousness is beginning to refine itself to pay attention to the subtle, to the energetic realms. And as you start to cultivate this language of paying attention to those things in that subtle realm of consciousness, that translates externally as emotional intelligence, as presence, to be able to see in a conference room, body language when something is being said that actually cues you into something that you wouldn't have otherwise thought, that gives you the insight and the key to unlock that scenario. You become hyper present, and it feels like an unfair advantage to be so present in a room, because the majority of the human population is just not. And when you can see, the realm of emotions and energy in it, and I think that requires for men the integration of our inner feminine. The inner feminine, I think, starts to give you that, And what is the inner feminine? Well, I mean, I think we can go into a big discourse in that, but the aspect of it is just to be able to see. And I believe that my advantage in business came when I developed sight, when I developed the language of the soul, because again, it just allowed my leadership to display an energetic language, to my team, because of what I was embodying as a leader. The language is really the movement that you have, how you respond, how you move, how you care for others, how you care for your body. That does the informing. It's just like when you have an embodied parent raising a child, the embodiment speaks. The body speaks a language in the way that it's just so present. And to have that in your tool belt as an entrepreneur, it's just the next level. It's the next level.
I love sorry to interrupt you, but I
That's
love
okay.
this. I just want to highlight that you are, actually you were the one that introduced me. I was aware, but I was not actively present doing that into biohacking. Now I have my red panel light, how do I start my morning? What do I drink? The amount of protein. I mean, I stopped after you came to one of my events or retreats, and you were like, when is the real food coming? I was all like eating seeds like a vegan. And you were like, where's the food? Where are my muscles? I'm like, what? What is he talking about? I started eating meat and grass-fed beef and liver and all of that, which, imagine. But I got to pay tribute to you for that, because what you're speaking about embodiment, of really taking care of your soul, of being a parent, a good business owner, a good philanthropist, you do have to tend to the temple. You need to have to tend to your language, to your thoughts, to your process. So I wanted to pay tribute to you for that, and detour us a little bit, because Francisco, you're one of the, you are phenomenal at taking care of the temple of the soul, of your body. And I know, because I've always get questions, we have a podcast that you and I did in English and Spanish, I know in Latin America, the most asked question, and you came into our network television once, and you got a lot of fans, it was so very kind and loving. But the number one question that we got is like, how does he do it? How does he live? I mean, what he wakes up, what does he do? Can you walk us a little bit through your template of self-care? Because I stayed one time in your house, and I remember 5 a.m., the mantra, the red light therapy. I'm like, wow, I got, I felt like I gotta keep up. But in a very invitational way. There's zero judgment when it comes to you, because you're always finding the nuggets of more perfection, not perfection per se, but of perfecting the individual, of polishing the sculpture that God gave us, right? Like the rock, and find the David in the stone, so to speak.
I was just thinking of that quote. It's one of my favorite. Michelangelo says that. He says, "I saw the angel in the marble, and I didn't stop carving until I set him free."
Isn't that us?
I think that's that kind of the way I relate to it. I feel like the human body is an
Oh,
angel,
you totally
without.
are, David. You
Thank
totally are a David. I'm in the process of sculpting the rock, everybody. All right. So,
I
brother,
feel, yeah, thank you for that. But and I still, like, every day I'm looking at sculpting that thing, because I do feel like the true human form is just an angel minus the wings.
oh,
Um,
wow.
but yeah, but I do, I think, to your point, I think one thing that we speak about here at Giving Business Soul, and we introduce the pathway of embodiment for everybody, is that we have a very specific way that we look at this, and that we define it, because I think there is such a thing as tyranny of words. People use these concepts. It's like, well, what does he mean by embodiment, and what do you mean by embodiment? And I think it's important for everybody to understand what we mean by embodiment when we say it at Giving Business Soul. And I think that to kind of give you the framework of that is to first make the distinction energetically, that there is an energetic distinction between the frequency of the soul and the frequency of the body. And so imagine just for a moment, like, how refined of a frequency would the soul be? If it's really, it's in the, that's got the frequency of the divine within it. It must be a very refined frequency. So for it to be able to express itself through the physical body, the body will have to go through a purification process, because the frequency of the body is not in accordance with the frequency of the soul. And so there requires, I believe, a purification process of the temple, to rid it of all the toxicity, the environmental pollutions. The body has been under attack, And as I like to say in so many ways, is that the body is the final spiritual frontier. I think as most people that are in spirituality, kind of to your point, Ivonne, it's like we have negated the body. We were going into a transcending of the physical, a transcending of the matter, a transcending of the body. And what we're inviting people to do is to come back into the body, to purify the body so that the soul can express itself fully and unimpededly through the physical. And that's what we mean by embodiment is to do the psychological work to free the soul, and then to do the purification of the temple so that soul can express itself beautifully and unapologetically. When you're just, again, on mission, and you're very clear that your role is to do what you're doing. And so in my process of taking care of the body, I mean, I think the best way to do it, to simplify it, really is to look at it from the standpoint of my breath. All right. It's like I kind of the logic that I take and the framework is that, pay attention to the most important things that the body needs before it dies, in another way. So obviously the breath is the most important. You can only be without breath for a little while, a couple minutes before something tragic happens. So the very first thing is just paying attention to your breath. Just learning that as humans, you're not supposed to breathe through your mouth. All day and all night, just breathe through your nose, activate the parasympathetic system of the thing. So you're always in rest and recovery. You can produce testosterone and estrogen. You're activating the endocrine system, the pituitary gland, and doing everything that it needs to do to actually properly regenerate itself. The second thing that the body can do without the least is sleep. People think that sometimes it's water, but it's actually sleep. You can only be a few days without sleeping until you actually die. So sleeping is crucial, and what's most crucial in that is restoring again the original template. And what I mean by that is that for thousands and thousands of years, we've been on nature's circadian rhythm. And it really has only been until the development of the Western world and all the light exposure that we have gotten out of that rhythm of nature. And I believe it's getting out of that rhythm of nature that doesn't allow us to see the beauty in life, because we're just not able to see clearly because of being out of alignment with that rhythm. Like if you want to come into the mystery, it's like I can imagine us in the very early times when only our mythos was developed and the logos wasn't. And all we would do was just come in and just see the great Sophia at work, just the alignment of the stars, the migration of the birds, like this beautiful symphony that's always been here. But we can't even hear the birds anymore, because we're so, the birds are the language of the higher realms into the lower. And it's like, if you're not even hearing the birds, come back into the rhythm of nature. And then the water, just making sure it's the cleanest water. Never drink anything from plastic. Yeah, I think that's people are starting to discover that. I've been off of plastic for about a decade. Microplastics, and just drinking, structured water. And that's the fourth phase of water. So just Google that. It's the most important phase of water. It's the water phase that is in the human body. And when we have more structured water, we can retain more energy, more light, more communication within the cells, intercellularly. And then food. And I think when it comes to health, here's what I would share with everybody. It's a quote that I've been loving recently, and especially as it relates to health, it says, like, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who can't read and write. It will be those who can't unlearn and relearn again. It's like such a great quote because it's so poignantly true. It's like everything we've been taught practically has been inverted and backwards, to the detriment of the human species. Ephesians 6:12. It's like there's been a war on the human vessel and the human body, and all of this inversion of everything has been, I think, a last ditch effort for them to slow down the progress of our divine intelligence. I think
because we're being led right now by hungry ghosts, Francisco.
Well, that too.
3:16, it's like for we don't battle with flesh and form, but with the
principalities of darkness that govern this world.
from the side. But when you have, I just all that you are sharing, it reminds me, Emperor Shennong, who was the founder of Chinese medicine and also the father of tea. Many consider him the father of tea. When he found Camellia sinensis, the mother of tea, by serendipity, by ordained timing. Was his mission. He was in a search for medicinal herbs for the emperors. It was all about the empire. It was all about the empire, but the leaf fell. One of the leaves of the plant fell in his cup of water, and the sun warmed it up. And he woke up by the revitalizing smell. And he smelled it and he drank it, and it was the first cup of tea, green tea. And he only shared the Camellia sinensis with the emperors, with the people of power. And the people of power, they were so hungry, right, that they just kept it for themselves while it's happening right now. While the people that make the countries were sick, and they were kind of using them as labor ants, right? Like right now. And it says that when the emperor drank the first cup of tea, the Camellia sinensis became human. So the spirit of the plant inside the emperor, because it moved the soul of the emperor, it brought it within to the without. The emperor started being more healthy, feeling better, feeling more aligned to the light, more aligned to. And he said, "There's something wrong. Why are we only giving the best food, water, tea, etc., to the people in power instead of the people that create the real power, which are, you know, uh, all the people?" And it is said that when he brought the tea to the people, that's the day the emperor became tea. So when you are sharing with me all of this and you are sharing with the people, it's like we gotta bring more health awareness. We got to unplug from all the old biases. We got to unplug from the misuse of power that keeps indoctrinating our humanity in a reverse way, in a against from nature, because the hunger for power and the hunger for and the greed is just that. So let's talk a little bit about power. I know we have a couple of more minutes, but let's talk about power, because you are so. I've heard you speak before, and what is the place of power in these times in humanity, and how can we use it wisely?
Well, yeah. So I would say that we are obviously in this great transition, and I think the frame that you're sort of poking at is this idea, like, if you want to shift a society, you simply have to look at who's got the concentration of power in that society, right? Who's the dominant power structure in society? And this is really a beautiful thing for all the listeners to take in. When I first saw this, it really started to kind of open up the potential that we have to really transform our world. And it's like, you simply have to look at who's got the largest buildings on the landscape. The largest buildings demonstrate where there's the concentration of power. So if you go back into our very known history, you look at the castles. The castles represented the largest buildings at the beginning of our known history. And it was at that time where kings and queens held the most amount of power. So the kingdoms were the power source, right? Eventually, the castles give way to church buildings, where then all of a sudden the church has the most amount of power in society. And it's at that time where the priest and the pope start to kind of tell us how things are. And eventually those give way to the capital state buildings of countries and states, where then politicians and presidents start to govern us and direct us, right? And now we're in this other phase where now the government state buildings are no longer the largest. It's now business buildings, right? Business buildings are the largest buildings on the landscape. And so what it really represents is that business is the current dominant power structure. And this is the first time in our known history where this dominant power structure can actually be shifted, because in a kingdom, in a church, in government, you technically have to belong to bloodlines to get to the very top of those hierarchies. And in business, we just have to be entrepreneurs. So if we simply shift the way that we begin to show up in business, then we have the ability to really move the needle in society in a big way. But in order to do that effectively and not run into the same pattern where absolute power absolutely corrupts, this is where the call into the entrepreneur to say, go inward, go all the way through, all of your wounding, unite your opposites, right? And in the ancient times, they would call this descent into the underworld, which is to go in through the lower realms of your consciousness, sort of the animal nature of your consciousness, right? So that you can, sort of untangle that and let that energy rise into the higher centers, right? And the lower chakra is the root chakra, and the root chakra is all about survival, and that's all about money, right? And then the second chakra there, second energy center, is about pleasure and our sexuality. And then the third one is about the solar plexus, about power and status, right? And dominion and authority. And so entrepreneurs that don't go all the way through those realms have the potential to be, essentially, you would say that they could be bought, right? Because if they haven't gone all the way to the root, then money is still a big problem. So they can be bought, they can be seduced, right, by a woman, by a man, and they can be bribed for power, right? Which is that third center. So again, it's like the lower three centers represent that. And if the entrepreneur is not willing to go all the way to reclaim themselves, that they run the risk of that. They run the risk of being bribed, of being seduced, about being bribed for power. And if we don't go and do the work that's necessary so that we don't become susceptible to that, until we are willing to do that, the power structure has the tendency to corrupt. It has, because that virus, that Wetiko, can come in at any point and all of a sudden, hit the business section, and it means start to corrupt like it is now. And that's why it's necessary for us to reestablish, that soul presence, so that we don't run into that.
Wow. That this was, I think we're going to complete this episode. I want to bring you more, because I have for other episodes I have more questions for you, but let's
Sure.
talk about, this was phenomenal. Could you tell us about your book? When do you plan to reveal it? Because I think that's a timing book, right? That has been about the right timing. Tell us a little bit about it. Please come back when it's out there so we can
Yes, I will. So the book, thank you. The book is called "Giving Business Soul: The Rebirth of the Merchant," and so what I discovered in this inward process was the redemption of a lost archetype. Carl Jung says that archetypes are like old water courses that essentially the water has run into, and if it's dried up, that eventually that water will come back into that archetype when it's necessary for it to emerge in our humanity. And I believe what we've been missing as an entrepreneurial community is we've been missing an archetype. And an archetype is an idea that is compressed, that has many dimensions of imagery and meaning and ideology attached to it. And the archetypes are a part of the mythos. Earlier you mentioned the logos, the two basic bodies of knowledge or education that is necessary for the human condition is both the logos and the mythos. And so the logos is very well developed. This is sort of logic, reason, mental sort of critical thinking. It's the necessary component to exist in reality, in the external. What has been severed, and which is where we are in agony as a society, has been the mythos. The mythos is the educational component that has always been necessary for the soul. Right? It's the stories, it's the legends, it's the archetypes that are necessary to inform the soul of what this experience is all about. It's ultimately to remind ourselves of our divinity. And interestingly enough, where the mythos first got severed, it's been severed multiple times in different very powerful societies. The Judaistic society and Jewish faith, around 621 BC, Josiah in the Deuteronomist time, essentially, this is when they eliminated, they had Yahweh and they had the Queen of Sheba, or no, I'm sorry, not the Queen of Sheba, the Queen of Heaven. So you had Yahweh with his feminine counterpart, and King Solomon, to give you a code. King Solomon was the wisest, king. He comes from the Davidic line, which is the same line of Yeshua, and his name is really important because he was an initiate of Egypt, and being an initiate of Egypt, he was welcomed into the mystery rites of life and death and rebirth and soul reclamation, and he was an initiate of the highest order, which is why you see his name being Solomon. Sol is sun, moon is moon. His name is a representation of the merger between the opposites. And it's because of that merger that he was able to complete in himself that actually is why he was wise. The wisdom comes from the tension of those poles coming into alignment so that you can draw in from the mythos. And he established the first temple in Jerusalem. And in Josiah in that time, they eliminate the Queen of Heaven. And they start getting rid of the sacred groves and the stories of the cosmic tree of life. And in that time, prior to that, this cosmic tree, this axis mundi, this tree that was symbolically embedded in the middle of the earth, which represented the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. It was like this was the cosmic tree. And when you incarnate, the shamanistic tradition says that that the bridge between the other world, the spirit world, and this physical world is the tree of life. And so when we choose to incarnate, that little Merkaba, that little light body goes through the tree of life, and comes in through our own mother's womb. That also is symbolic. If you've ever seen the placenta, it looks like the tree of life. So you come in through, Sophia's womb and then the womb of your mother. And so but all that to say that the axis mundi is this tree of life. And in those times, we used to partake of the fruit of that tree of life. That was the mythos. That was the story. When we would eat from this fruit, we would regain the understanding of our divinity. So the fruit was what you wanted to eat. And it's 621 BC that mythos gets shut down. They invert the story. Now all of a sudden this tree becomes a tree of knowledge. You cannot partake of this fruit because it's good and evil. But there was the first slash. And then when the Church of Rome came, they shut down the Greeks and the Eleusinian mysteries, who were initiatory rites for the Platos and the Socrates and the developers of the Western world. It's like they would go into those realms of mythos and the quantum and the realm of the spirit, and they would see what was coming next for society. And that's the role of all of us, is to go into the realm of the quantum, into the realm of spirit, and see. And then it's our role to bridge it into the physical. We are the bridges, right? We are the bridge between the heaven and the earth. And it's in those realms of the heaven and the spirit and the quantum that is wanting to emerge into the physical, but it's going to come through us. And the entire foundation of the Western world was built from individuals that were always accessing those states and then bringing them. And so when the Church of Rome shut down the Eleusinian mysteries, one of the great philosophers said this could be the end of the Western world, right? Because they were shutting the door to the mythos. And then in 400 AD, Theosidus gets rid of the Gnostic Christians, which was a true teaching of Yeshua, right? Constantine sort of monopolizes the religion, 325, but there's this other sector that were still holding the true teachings of Yeshua. That gets shut down about 380 AD, and they said, no. You cannot have direct experience of the divine. Only the emperor can do it, right? And then they shut that door, and then we go into the Dark Ages for the last, 400 AD to 1100 AD. That's when Europe goes into the Dark Ages, and all this deep knowledge of alchemy and the soul and the mythos starts to move out of Europe. And it's not until, the Arthurian legends and the Holy Grail where this first mythos just comes roaring back.
Wow. Francisco, I think I need to invite you back, when the book is out, because you just represented something that I always share. Like, the past is a place of reference, not of residence, but we need to learn where we come from because we will understand the patterns, not only of where we're going to, but where the pendulum is going to swing back in order to create harmony, because the pendulum always swings. And that's another universal law. It is about to swing. It is happening right now. We're in that transition of the pendulum swinging. And you have said so many golden nuggets of wisdom here. I really recommend everyone to listen twice, at least twice, to the podcast. I know I did so many notes, but this is such a blessing because it opens a door for all of us, not only to understand the logos, but to welcome the mythos back, mythos. And I just want to say something because you mentioned Annabelle. And just for the people that are here, like, because Francisco and I are friends. Hi, Annabelle. Annabelle Vizcara was in our podcast. I hope to have her back. But make sure to check her podcast. She's a phenomenal representative of the mythos, right? She is a phenomenal representative of the sacred womb of the divine. And they work together. Often they do retreats together, they do events together. And you gotta check that out. And also another shout out because of the mythos. Someone else that was in the podcast, Francisco, she is such a divine feminine. Her name is Christina Marie. You probably know her, but her work is solely on that. That's her specialization, besides being one of the best editors for books and copywriters and just phenomenal artists. But that's her specialty, the mythos, the hero's journey in the way. I just wanted to highlight that just to honor the women. We started honoring the to create that union in this podcast. And my brother, this was phenomenal. I thank you for all your wisdom, for sharing a little bit of your, of the health journey of the physical temple of everything. I mean, this is a packed, very, very packed, but very clear podcast episode that people can study. And I know they will feel the soul and they will give business to their business soul, to their easiness, which is, where we stand from anyways. Any last words, any little blessing to our audience, Francisco, before we leave?
Just thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Hopefully that your listeners enjoy what they've heard. And certainly it's been a labor of love to put the pieces to the puzzle, because I feel like for me, that's what was missing. Like to your point, it's like the past isn't anything other than to learn exactly sort of what's transpired. And a big portion of our history has been wiped out. And I think it was purposefully done so that we couldn't reclaim this mythos, which is actually the missing ingredient to transform the world. So do your research on the mythos. If you're an entrepreneur, go to givingbusinesssoul.com. You can find out about the events, the retreats, you can find the introduction to the book.
Your podcast.
The podcast as well. Yeah, it's like everything is
By the
developed.
way, I want to say something, everyone. And yeah, and then before we leave, Francisco was one of the first ones to bless our podcast. This man takes things to the next level. And we were talking about his podcast by then. But when he does things, he does them right. Me, I'm like, let's venture. I'm faith in action in motion. But it's such a phenomenal podcast, very well produced. If you are watching us on YouTube, you can see his branding. I am going to copy. Copy publicly. You can see his branding, even business soul, the microphone, but it's phenomenal. We are going to make sure, Francisco, to put all of the links of your podcast, your website, your social media. Please not only follow, but dive deep into it. And if you want opportunities to go and build a house in Ensenada, I really feel that philanthropy really brings the soul to life once you take action upon the service you are going to render, whatever you want to support. When you are actively a participant on it, not only a donor, there is something deeper that initiates you to a higher level of consciousness.
Exactly. That's exactly it. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Francisco. Muchas gracias a todos. We love you. We will see you next week. Please listen to the podcast several times. And we love you. Un besito. Adiós.
Hasta luego. Mucho amor.
We hope you enjoyed this new episode, and if you did, Please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere where you prefer to listen to your podcast. Make sure to check the links to everything we mentioned in this episode. For more news, future or past episodes, or for any other inquiry, please visit our website at delaflorteachings.com. Once again, thank you for listening to the Spirituality Now podcast.